All right, everyone. So Django has been banned on Friday, which means we finally got to see our first small tournaments without Django Fett and without DJ and without Triple Dark Raid. So we're going to dive into a few tournaments, talk about the meta. The new meta is here, and I'm actually kind of excited about this. Now, we are not going to be able to have amazing data for the time being. We don't have anything like a massive sector qualifier or anything like that to base our judgments off, which realistically, that's really going to determine where the meta is shaping up to be. If you look back in set 2, when we got to see a lot of the small tournaments take place, actually, Boba Fett was not a really big mainstay. It was not until the bigger tournaments, the planetary qualifiers, started happening when we actually got to see the meta truly develop and take place. So I'm certain that that's partially what's going to happen here, and partially we're going to see a little bit of the trends moving away from Django, because the meta was already kind of situated. We already saw some decks really performing well, even amidst the Django meta, but now we get to see what it's like a little bit afterwards. A big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you for supporting that channel, and also I have a TCG player link in the description down below. But if you look here and we pull up all of these tournaments are the ones that have taken place post Django Fett. And if we just go down the list in terms of winners, now again, a lot of these are anywhere from 12 to 35-ish players, so not massive. And in some cases, if it's like 16 players, who cares? Like, in terms of what's actually top 8ing to some degree, obviously we're going to see a few decks that are meta, but if there's only 16 players, it's very likely for a little bit of a more tier 2, tier 3 deck to at least get in the top 8. So just keep that in mind as we're going through. But we have Han Yellow as the first winner here, Quinlan Red, Sabine Green, Palpatine Blue, Cad Bane Red, another Han Yellow. We've got another Sabine, Cad Green, Kira Double Blue, Sabine Green, and Quinlan Red. So there's 2 decks, or I should say 3 decks, really, that are putting up major results across the board, as far as I've seen. Quinlan Red doing great, Sabine Green doing amazingly. And these 2, not surprising at all, okay? Quinlan Red, perceived as potentially the best deck, and at least in my opinion, has some of the best options and some of the best deck building options, especially with the sideboard, to combat all the things going on in the meta. But Sabine Green was an absolute classic, and I'm really not surprised people defaulting to Sabine Green after one of the worst matchups in history for Sabine being banned taking place. Like, Sabine Green really dominated the meta for a while in terms of just being a constant threat. Django comes in and really struggled, or I should say Sabine rather, really struggled up against Django even in set 3, and then just got massively buffed for set 4, and then was just a nightmare matchup for Sabine in a lot of situations. So the fact that Django's gone doesn't surprise me at all that we're seeing a bunch of Sabines take place. But one thing that might be a little bit surprising to some people is we're still seeing a lot of Han Yellows. And this isn't surprising to me, at least. I mentioned this in my a couple of videos already, but DJ is an amazing part of Han Yellow. Don't get me wrong. And all the Hans in general. The combo potential for it to do the tech shenanigans is amazing, right? But oftentimes you would play double yellow Han and you could just play DJ as a 7 resource threat and stall people on their 6 to flip leader. Yes, that was all things you could do. But realistically, the strength of Han isn't the fact that you can do DJ tech nonsense and have permanent resource control with DJ. It's the fact that you get to have an extra resource whenever you want it in a single turn. That's incredibly strong. And that still dominates a ton of matchups. And that's what we're seeing here. The other decks, Cad, couple of Cad decks. Again, not a surprising one. I'd say Cad Red was definitely on the radar. Cad Red had a really rough matchup up against Django, so the fact that we're seeing more Cad makes a ton of sense. And then we have a few controlling decks, Kira Double Blue and Palpatine Blue. Again, not super surprising there either. These are decks that have constantly kind of shuffled around in the meta, and I do think that, at least in terms of Palpatine, really nice option up against certain decks. And as far as I can remember in terms of game percentage, Palpatine Yellow was a pretty bad matchup, but Palpatine Blue, because it was a more controlling option, did not amazingly up against Django, but did okay. It did okay with the fact that DJ's banned and the fact that Django is gone, and more importantly, arguably for these controlling decks, Triple Dark Raid being gone makes it a lot easier for these decks not to get surprised by a ton of damage. One of the scariest cards when you're playing like double blue Kira or Palpatine blue is when your opponent's playing, like, let's say Boba 4. That was a nightmare matchup for Palpatine, by the way. And they got a Fet's Fire Spray, the 4-cost version that is, and they just play it. Sure, you're getting pinged for some damage, but you can deal with it. But then they go Triple Dark Raid into a Fet's Fire Spray, and suddenly you get hit for 2 with the indirect damage, plus a 3rd point, most likely because you're playing a controlling deck, you don't have units. So you get hit for 3 on impact with a Boba leader. They attack in for 4. You get another 2 indirect damage to your base. That's a total of 9 damage. 9 damage coming in with a Triple Dark Raid. That's incredibly dangerous for these controlling decks. So the fact that Triple Dark Raid is gone makes some of these controlling options even more secure in their late game plans. But as we dive into some of the tournaments, as I mentioned earlier, I basically went through and picked some of the bigger tournaments, the ones that have like 30 plus players or so, because there's a ton to go through. But this first one, US tournament, we've got Han Yellow winning. We have a bunch of random decks. Blue Luke and Luke 4, that is, and Anakin Colossus. Not surprising to see both these lists. Luke Blue, the Luke 4 Blue, that is, was a really strong list. And this is what I mentioned in my Luke Green video, is that it kind of resembles like an Anakin Blue or a Rey Red type of list. But you have even more late game potential because of Luke's deploy on a space unit. And the fact that Luke himself can't be defeated by upgrade hate is really, really important. But you can just dominate the board. It kind of feels like old Vader 1, right? But it comes down a turn earlier, which is massively important. Luke Blue, really solid list. Obi-Wan Green. This is a list that I put together a leader tier list after Django before I started recording this video. And this is a leader that I have on my radar right now. I'm actually really interested in it because of all the pings that were coming around, especially with like Cad Bane. Obi-Wan was a really nice option up against those. And it actually had really solid win rates in the games that we saw. So I'm really curious about this one. Vader from set 4, Yoda Blue, Kazuda Red coming in, and Poe Blue. All of these ones, except Kazuda Red. Although this one has Thermal Oscillator, I generally prefer Tarkin Town across the board. I mean, Tarkin Town is just an absurd base. I'm not a huge fan of a Thermal Oscillator build, but all of these lists kind of on that more fringe territory. Kazuda is the most talked about of these 4 for the most part, but not with Thermal Oscillator in general. The next top 8, this one is probably going to be way more typical of what I would expect the meta to be. Okay, check this out. Quinlan first, Sabine Red. Kind of interesting that we're seeing Tarkin Town Sabine, but Sabine Green, Red in second. Another Quinlan Red in third. Sabine Green in fourth. We have Gar Yellow, which I think is an amazing list, by the way, in fifth. Cad Bane Red sixth. Anakin Blue in seventh. And Han Yellow in eighth. This, to me, this is a perfect representation of what I consider to be some of the best decks in the format. Quinlan Red, Sabine in general. I think Sabine Red does have a chance just because of how powerful Tarkin Town is. Cad Bane Red, Anakin Blue, Han Yellow, even Gar Saxon Yellow, I would put up into not quite as strong as some of the other lists on this list, but still a very good option and very strong. So this, not surprised at all that we're seeing this as the 1K cash tournament. And it's kind of interesting because the other one that we're talking about is the other ones that we're talking about are store showdowns, which are inherently a little bit more casual. So I'm not surprised to see like the ones that we just saw, like Vader for blue, yellow, or Poe Blue popping up. But with the cash tournament, seeing a more traditional meta that we would have expected, this makes a lot more sense. Another minor tournament here. In Sweden, we've got Sabine Green taking it down with a Han Green, has second place finish. Another Sabine Green in third place. We have a Lake Country Iden, really interested in this list, by the way. In fourth, Boss Green in fifth, double Anakins in sixth and seventh, and another Sabine Green in eighth. Another one that's, well, something that I would kind of expect. The Iden's a little bit surprising, but all of these other lists make a lot of sense. I spoke about Boss a lot and how Boss Green is a viable option. It actually did really well in set 3, and Data Vault makes a good amount of sense in that list as well. Just getting a little bit of extra HP and being able to stall out the game just a little bit longer while you get a ton of value with your bounty hunters quarries or just ramping a ton to get to your crate dragons, etc. This, again, not surprising as the top 8 finishes. Okay. Next up, we've got Store Showdown in Barcelona. This one, we've got Palpatine Blue taking it down with a Cad Blue in second. This one was a pretty popular list with Jango running around. Double Yellow Kazuda, double Quinlan Red here in fourth and fifth. Piet Blue in sixth. Thrawn Red in seventh. And Anakin Blue in eighth. Again, not super surprising, with the exception of potentially Thrawn Red and maybe to some degree Cad Bane Blue. This was a list that was kind of specifically built to counter the Jango meta, and it didn't do all that well against some other decks. Now, it's still a controlling list, and you can still win with it, period. But I don't think that that's going to be a list that we're going to see a whole lot, and it could be surprising to me if we do. The Thrawn Red, this one is more of, depending on the matchup, I'd say. In some matchups, Thrawn does extremely well and can combo off, and I say combo lightly, but get your Vals to work and get an 8 powered unit very quickly, or Krennic into something else, and just play something for extremely cheap, like a 5 resource Ruthless Raider or whatnot. But I'm not expected to see Thrawn a ton. Piet Blue, nice little soft control list into a bunch of capital ships. All of this, again, not very surprising. Another Store Showdown in France. Han Yellow taking the whole tournament. We've got Han 1 Yellow taking the whole tournament. Han 2 Green taking second place. Quinlan Red, Thermal Oscillator Kazuda. Quinlan Green, set 4 Boba, another Quinlan Red, and another Thrawn Red. I'm curious about set 4 Boba. We haven't really been seeing a ton of it. Obviously, people are way less impressed with it because of Triple Dark Raid, and I would agree. I still think it's a strong list. I'm not surprised to see, it popping up here and there. But it definitely got a major hit with the banning of Triple Dark Raid. It's one of the other decks alongside Jango that got really hit hard with Triple Dark Raid. It's really the only two, Boba 4 and Jango, were the two that really, really got hurt by the Triple Dark Raid bans. And then I think this is the last one. This is the one that hasn't been finished yet, as far as I understand. But we have a France tournament, 84 players. Maybe it is finished, actually. We have Quinlan Red, Palp Blue, Piet Blue, and Han Double Yellow. Again, all lists that we've talked about. All of them are lists that we've talked about. The Quinlan Red just been popping up everywhere. It has been popping up everywhere. And that is not surprising at all. It was positioned as like number 2 deck in the format, even with Jango being in the format, okay? It was just doing amazingly. It had a reasonably close win rate up against Jango. It just has so much pressure on the early game into massive amounts of disruption. Palpatine Blue and Piet Blue kind of on similar angles, both running the Colossus. I do think Colossus is a strong base. Getting that 5 extra HP can matter a ton. But Palpatine, a little bit more on the value side of things, whereas Piet's definitely try to take advantage of the cost cheating with Piet's leader ability. A bunch of capital ships can do some major work. And then Han Yellow still being in the meta. This is, again, something that I've mentioned numerous times, and I still think is going to be the case, but I don't think Yellow Han is out of the meta with the DJ ban. It's still going to be one of the stronger decks in the meta. The ability to cheat on resources is just insanely powerful. But that pretty much is kind of like a brief description, and I could go into, all the different stats on all these tournaments. I just don't find it to be all that valuable to go ahead and do so with these smaller tournaments. The one that I took the most stock in was the 1K cash tournament. When you have like minor tournaments or the Store Showdown or win a box, like the prize pool is so much smaller, or the people pool is so much smaller, or it's more of a casual environment, that you're going to see a lot of these random decks, which is why I say we kind of have to wait for the sector qualifiers or the planetary qualifiers or a tournament of that caliber to really determine what the meta will be. But if I were to give a guess on like what I expect the meta to be, it would be this 1K cash tournament is what I would expect this meta to shape up to be. Very aggressively focused, with Quinlins and Sabines, very much tempo based, lots of disruption or lots of pressure. You have decks like Han Yellow still in there, decks like Anakin kind of creeping in the mid-range value train that usually does reasonably well against a lot of the other decks that are a little bit more aggro. And, Gar Saxon, some of these like just under tier 0, like the tier 1 decks where they're like A tier lists. If the Sabines and Quinlan were S tiers, then I think Gar Saxon and stuff like that, and maybe even Anakin Blue are like in the A tier, where certainly solid decks and can pop up here and there, but not going to be as widespread as the Sabines, Quinlins, Cad Banes, and Han ones. Definitely something that I think this is what you should be preparing for. This is the type of meta that I think we're going to see a lot of. And of course, Quinlan and Sabine were popping up everywhere, not just this. Same with Han, same with Anakin, same with Cad Bane, same with Gar Saxon. All these guys were popping up all over the place anyways, okay? But I wouldn't expect to see like random decks like Vader 4 or what was another list that we saw? Oh my gosh, Poe Dameron. That was what. Those types of decks or leaders I don't see really making a splash in the meta after a Jango ban. It's just going to be the decks that we already were seeing really start to actually be seen again because Jango isn't just dominating them out of the format. I'm curious to see if we're going to see anything new. Kazuto was the closest I could consider to be a new deck because we didn't really see it up until we didn't really see it at all in the sector qualifiers because Jango was just so dominant against Kazuta, but that would be a list that I'd be on the lookout for potentially. I'm curious to hear what you all have to say because is Tarkin Town just going to be something that's going to dominate the meta? Most likely. Is that going to be a problem? Let me know. That was something that a lot of people had mentioned. Maybe they should just preemptively ban Tarkin Town. I think I lean on the side of let's ban DJ, Triple Dark Raid, Jango, that type of stuff first, and keep the ban list relatively on the lighter side potentially before we just start banning everything. Tarkin Town has become a problem, definitely. It is really pushing some strategies out of the game still, because if you need a little bit early setup and Tarkin Town can just give you a free disruption while putting on pressure to your opponent, it is quite strong. That's why we see Tarkin Town Quinlan and Tarkin Town Cad Bane, and heck, even in this case, a Tarkin Town Sabine coming into play. I definitely think this is going to be something that we're going to have to take a look on as we get more tournaments involved. But something that I can't really say for certain right now, since we don't have a lot of data, right? And this is something that we talked about with Jango, or a lot of people mentioned, like, oh, I got to wait for more data and that type of stuff. The difference between the data that we had with Jango was these were multi-100 person tournaments that were strictly competitive options, right? If you look, Milan, 546. The Boston Invitational, 122 and 116. We had the sector qualifier Denver and Liverpool, 418, 430 entrants. These are massive tournaments, and they're competitive tournaments for the competitive scene. The tournaments that we're seeing now, store showdowns, minor tournaments, maybe small cash tournaments, significantly less stakes involved and significantly less players involved. So really curious to see. Oh, and it looks like maybe we have an update. Sabine Green. Oh, as I'm talking, guys, the 84 player tournament updated. Sabine Green, Bosk Blue, Han 2 Green, Palpatine Yellow, Quinlan Red, and then the other list that we talked about. So makes sense. Again, Sabine Green really pushing her way in. Quinlan Red really pushing her way in. Both those completely make sense to me. And I'm expecting we're going to see a lot of the classics still there. But curious to hear what you all have to say. Thanks for watching, everyone. I know I rambled a little bit, but hey, new data just popped up in my face. I mean, how am I not going to give you that data? And we'll see what happens in the future tournaments. Thanks for watching.